Hi, this is Larry Bauer, Chief Executive Officer of the Family Medicine Education Consortium, and I'm pleased today to be talking with Dr. Heidi Chumley, who is the Executive Dean of the American University of the Caribbean Medical School. Dr. Chumley, thank you so much for joining with me today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So, Dr. Chumley, you and I had a chance to talk when we were together in Washington, D.C. at a meeting, and you told me an incredible story that full of drama and full of chaos, and I thought people needed to hear about this because leaders of organizations need to be prepared for the range of disasters that are possible in our contemporary world, and you and your colleagues with the what you're calling the Irma adventure have, I think, a great story to tell. So maybe you could give the listeners some background about your organization and your role in the organization, and then tell them about the events related to the hurricane.
Absolutely. So I am the Executive Dean at American University of the Caribbean. It is a university, a medical school that is nearing its 40th anniversary, and we are located on the island of St. Martin. That's where students do the first part of their education, after which they come to either the U.S. or the U.K. to finish their clinical rotations. And at any given time, we usually have somewhere between 800 and 1,000 students in St. Martin, on the island of St. Martin there, along with 30 to 40 faculty who are usually from the U.S. or other parts of the world, Europe, UK, Canada. And then we also employ around 200 people there in St. Martin. We are a U.S.-style medical school, and our graduates, our students take the USMLE exams. Our graduates go into U.S. Residency programs. About 85% of our students are American, about 10% are Canadian, and that is basically who we are. And we were about business as usual until the month of September last year, when on September the 6th, Hurricane Irma, a massive Category 5+ hurricane, passed directly over St. Martin. It was the largest hurricane that had been seen in the Caribbean for some time, and a very challenging hurricane for us to deal with.
So,
go ahead.
What was it like? What was it like as the hurricane? You had some warning, and as it was approaching. What was that like?
Well, we do hurricanes in the Caribbean, and so we are used to hurricanes. We had not dealt with anything of this magnitude before. It was terrifying. We began tracking the storm 7 days out. We had very good information about the storm, military-grade information, if you will. And around 72 hours before the storm would be passing by us, the storm was anticipating to pass where we would feel substantial winds, but certainly not over us as a Category 5. But when there were only about 48 hours left before the hurricane hit, its path wobbled, as do hurricanes, and we knew about 48 hours before Irma passed over St. Martin that we would be directly in the line of destruction. We were nervous, and I have an incredibly good campus team, very good at preparing our campus and our facilities for hurricanes, and they were rapidly at the business of doing that as we were beginning to prepare. What we also had, though, were a brand new class of medical students who had just arrived, about 200 of them, many with family members, and no opportunity to get anyone off the island of St. Martin. So we knew we were going to have upwards of several hundred people who had never been to St. Martin before with their families, really who hadn't moved in, didn't have supplies, and we went about trying to figure out best ways to work with them, take care of them. We were at a break in our semester as the new group was coming in for orientation, so we had a number of students off island, a number of students on island. So we were rapidly trying to ascertain the location of every student during the break. We ended up finding before the storm and encouraging everybody to come into our facilities because we had great confidence that our facilities can withstand whatever the Caribbean Ocean can throw at them, but less confidence that the places where most people live could withstand the storm. And so we managed to get nearly 700 people into our medical education building, and into our medical education building and our dorm. Our dorm has about 100 rooms, and got people in and ready to withstand the storm together. So a little sigh of relief from my side. Now I'm in Miami. I'm going to be off the island during the adventure. A little sigh of relief that we have gotten people in. We've gotten our facilities all tightened up, chained up, taped up, boarded up, all of the things you do, supplies in place. And I was seeing from the school pictures of happy students doing what medical students do, all sitting together studying, awaiting for the storm. So a little sigh of relief right before.
So what kind of give us a picture of what happened as the storm hit?
Right. So as the storm was coming in, and this was the early morning of September the 6th, I stayed on the phone with my team on campus till about midnight the night before, tried to get everybody to get a little sleep. We knew the storm would be coming in. Nobody was getting any sleep, though. As the winds picked up, they were really pretty scary for people. So got back on the phone around 2 in the morning, and around 4 o'clock in the morning, I lost contact with the team as the winds begin to get stronger. And at that point in time, you've done everything you can as a leader, and you are terrified, not sleeping, not just on edge, waiting until you can reestablish contact. When the eye passed over, the team was able to get a quick message out to me, basically, Heidi, we're okay. That was it, 3 words during the eye. And then it was several hours later when we could finally reestablish contact. And what I learned at that time was that the dorms where we were housing about 100 people, the balconies began to blow off during the hurricane, causing us to question the integrity of that building. So the leadership team in our education building, where the majority of people were, made the courageous and correct decision to move 100 people across the campus. It's not, you can see one building to the other, but to move 100 people during the eye of the storm. And they safely moved 100 people during the eye of the storm. And the storm finished and passed, and we had no major injuries, which was all really good. So we ended up with about 700 people in our education building and about 80 animals, because we shelter the dogs and cats and one bunny as well. But that was just the start of the adventure. that was just the start of the adventure, because as the dust settled, or the wind settled, if you will, and people were able to look outside, you could see for the first time the devastation to Island St. Martin. And our campus building stood, fortunately, but much else on the island did not stand. And we had our own generator, so we had power. We had our own water supply, so we had water. But that was certainly not the condition of the rest of the island. And we knew that we needed to immediately get everybody off the island. We were not going to be able to resume, not only were we not going to be able to resume classes there, but we were not sure how long we could keep people safe. When you are the only ones with water and power and perhaps food, you do set yourself up as a target. And we were worried then about the safety of our people there. So I turned my full attention with the CEO of our company, Lisa Wardell, to removing all of the people, the 700 people, from campus. And it took us, we were removing students and their families and our faculty, and we were supporting our folks who lived in St. Martin to help them be able to stay there and recover. So we did manage to pull off a full-scale evacuation. We had U.S. military jets land and take a number of our folks back, which helped us. And then military jets took some people to Puerto Rico. We were able to get a few people on some private chartered planes. We had a boat go with some people to St. Kitts, which we then flew to Puerto Rico. And we ended up bringing everybody to Chicago. And I've never been evacuated by the U.S. military, but you don't get to bring anything with you. So we now have almost our entire population of students who are on the island at the time with their families in Chicago with a backpack of what any supplies they might need. So we have an entire group that we need to take care of in Chicago as we are trying to figure out what happens to the semester, to their medical school education, what's going to be happening. So it took us 6 days to get everyone off and ensure the safety of ensure that all of our students and faculty were safe. It took a while to find some people who hadn't sheltered with us. So it was like running a code for 6 days, Larry. For the physicians listening in, it was an extreme amount of high stress crisis mode for 6 days straight.
Wow. So given that level of pressure and that duration, that would test the mettle of quite a few individuals, but also trying to coordinate a team of people. Could you talk a little bit about that, what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really hard. And I certainly look back and think of there are some things I would do a little bit differently. But one of the things I think really helped me was my training as a physician and my training in primary care, because you're just very used to dealing with situations that have an incredible amount of ambiguity. You're very used to dealing with situations where you need expertise from a whole number and different types of people, other specialties, other healthcare providers, and pulling them all together towards a single goal. So I had a lot of that. I was able to call upon a lot of my experiences in medicine to really help us come together and pull together. And our tasks were pretty simple. It was first safety, and second, it was continuity. Let's find a place to have school. So, while I was working with the CEO of our company to get everybody out and safe, I asked my chief academic officer, who's Dr. Julie Taylor, also a family physician, to find us somewhere else in the world to have medical school. That was the only restriction I gave her, is that it needs to be on our planet. You can look anywhere on our planet, and we'll figure out how to make it happen there. So she began, again, just really well, you start pulling people together, start trying to figure out what your options are. Your group grows, but you have people completely focused on one initiative, and that is finding a place that we can hold class. So they created a short list of 3 places. We could perhaps stay in Chicago. We could put students on a boat in the Caribbean, or we could go to the UK, where we had found a willing partner. And all of those solutions had an incredible number of challenges with them, but we decided to go with the UK option. And one of the things I think is really important is that in a crisis, you have to work parallel solutions right away, but you also have to choose a winner as soon as you can and focus people's efforts on that, because you're going to be moving really very, very quickly. You don't have time to make sure everything's going to work out before you choose a direction to go. Again, a lot like medicine, but you've got to choose the direction, and you've got to go, and then you've got to manage all the obstacles that come along your way. So we chose the UK, and so essentially what this meant was we were going to take our medical school and move it to another country, and we were going to do it in 9 days. And we had to do it in 9 days. 9 days.
Did you say 9? Like
9.
Oh my
9
God.
days. 9 days.
Okay.
And we had to do it in 9 days because that was our date by which, if we did not get the students re-enrolled in school, they would lose their funding, their Title IV funding for their classes, which included all of their living expenses. So they were reliant on that money. They had planned on that money. It's a big deal for everybody to have to rechange their financial situation that much with no notice. So 9 days is what we had, and the logistics were crazy, unbelievable. We had to allow people to get into another country. Our students had to be allowed to go there. Our faculty had to be allowed to go there. Our faculty had to be allowed to work there. We had to find places for them to stay. We had to reset our curriculum so we could deliver the same curriculum in a whole different set of facilities. And at all the while getting permission from all of our accrediting and approval agencies to go and do that. And obviously that takes a huge team, and not only the AUC leadership team, but also our parent company, Adtalem, just, all resources we needed, all people we needed, all expertise we needed came our way and worked hand in hand with us to be able to do that.
So just a comment, just what a remarkable story. Had this storm hit the U.S. and taken out Miami or another city with a medical school, it is hard for me to imagine that a school in the U.S., even though you didn't have the issue of getting people off the island and the military rescue piece, it's hard for me to imagine that a medical school could pull that off in that amount of time. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I tell you, everyone I tell the story to tells me something similar. They were very surprised we didn't have to close school. It is really hard to fathom being able to do that. And if we could have moved within a state or within the same country, that would have solved a lot of the logistical problems. So having to move to another country was really really a staggering ordeal. And we are very grateful to our partners at UCLan, University of Central Lancashire, who was our host school. They are an undergraduate institution there in Preston, UK, which is about an hour north of Manchester. They have a medical school there that's a UK-style medical school that is in, I believe, its third year of its 5-year program. It's brand new, just started. So they had facilities all ready for a large number of medical students as they were growing their program. They had housing people who had, or private housing vendors in the area who had just built a lot of excess capacity in anticipation of new groups of students coming in. So it was absolutely amazing that we found them. They found, and they found us, and that we were able to descend. They called it the second U.S. invasion of the UK. we were able to descend on the city of Preston, and they welcomed us with these open arms. And everyone from the city to the student government of UCLan to their highest level leaders, they were incredibly welcoming to us.
That is one heck of a story. That's amazing. That is amazing. Could you comment on how would you say this? Casualties. Were some folks harmed in this process? Because I can imagine that for some people, be they students or family members, adapting through all this change must have been quite a stress for them. Any comments about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We fortunately didn't have major injuries, but as you mentioned, this was an incredible ordeal. Medical school is hard enough without going through a terrifying storm, not knowing what your future is going to hold for, a couple of weeks, and then being moved to another country, and then having to learn the material you were supposed to learn in a little bit shorter period of time. It's already a pretty cramped curriculum, and certainly our faculty, who most of whom lost most of their possessions, then were moved from one place to another as well. So that's really, really hard on people, and we think of ourselves, one of our cultural traits as a university is our resilience. We think of our students having incredible resilience to choose to come to an international medical school when they haven't been accepted typically to a U.S. school. So that's core to our very being, that resilience. But this way over-tested people's resilience, and was more than you can usually ask of people. So we engaged rather quickly with an expert in PTSD around natural disasters, and we used his expertise to help us create a wraparound wellness program, which worked really well for the students, and I think we perhaps didn't wrap it around the faculty as well as we could have, but they were just, I think we may have recognized late how tired they were, because they just dove in and did everything that we asked. But we wrapped all those resources around the students. And one decision that we made early was that we would let any student who wanted to take a leave of absence with no academic penalty at all. If you need a break, you can take a break, and we will adjust our school policies such that it doesn't hurt you academically. And so we had, starting with the 100% students we had planned to have in that September semester, we had about 6% of students then not join us in the UK to continue their education. Since then, about half of those came back. So we ended up with 97% of students staying in the educational program, which I am just extremely proud of. I think a lot of people would have I'm going to choose a different way to go. But 97% of the students stayed with us. You know, we modified our testing and assessments right around, you know, learning what we could from the literature. You know, that Tulane had gone through a similar experience. They had published on how their students didn't do as well on the internal exams, but then recovered by the time of step one. So we modified our assessments to try to take into account what may be happening with the students and on their minds. And we were able to really work with the students, I think, and get them to be at least to hold them steady until they had gotten settled there in the UK and could begin, you know, to be really focused on their academics again.
Wonderful. So one of the things that I'm thinking as I'm listening to you talk is I think the general public may not appreciate when someone decides they want to be a doctor, what depth of commitment there is to that sense of calling, to the profession. And I would think, had this been, and I'll take my own case, I'm a social worker, so had this been a school of social work, I would have imagined a moderate, at least, number of people would have just given up and they would have gone some other route rather than having to stay the course and deal with all of the stress. So the fact that only 3%, you know, backed away, that's pretty remarkable, and it speaks to the tenacity and resilience of people who choose the medical profession.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And you know, it's always hard to include all the really important parts of the story, but we saw during the 6 days on the island as we were trying to get people out, medical students played key roles. They became part of the medical team. We had a number of physicians there. We have good facilities. We were able to set up to do some minor medical care for the island while we were still there. Students became a big part of that. Students participated in everything, in organizing and cooking the food and finding the students we hadn't located, in delivering messages, in helping out in the shelter. It was absolutely amazing how many students, you know, in the midst of all of this going on and raised their hand and said, how can I help? I am stepping up to be a leader in times of crisis. It's just absolutely amazing. And then to your earlier question about, or your earlier point about the type of person that goes into medicine, it is really challenging to get into medicine, and you know, we know that probably you know, if you think about all of the students who take the entrance exam for medicine, which is of course only one of the ways you measure people's success, but one that's probably overused in the U.S., you see that really you've got to be in that top 20% to have a really good shot getting to school in a U.S. allopathic medical school. We take students who are who score in a much different place on that entrance exam, but have these amazing life stories, experiences, all of the things we want our doctors to have. They've got leadership qualities, they've had international experience, they've had service experiences, and I think part of our success, maybe a lot of our success in this Irma adventure, has to do with the type of students that we have at AUC, and the students who, you know, perhaps don't do as, you know, in the top 10% on a multiple choice test, but they certainly do in the top 10% of the very important things in life.
That is wonderful to hear. Could you comment on the aftermath? Here we are in the summer of 2018. Where's your school now? Where are the students now? And what are the plans for return to the Caribbean?
Absolutely. So that's the back half of a really amazing story. St. Martin itself is quite a resilient island, and within 4 weeks within 2 weeks actually, had the healthcare system back up and running. And remember, it's a largely primary care healthcare system on a small island, with the exception of dialysis. They could not ensure that the water was clean enough for the dialysis to take place. It was about 6 weeks before airplanes could land, and about 8 weeks before cruise ships began coming. But they got their island stabilized really very quickly, and we were able to bring a group of our students back to St. Martin in January. So, one of the things that I strongly believe is that, wherever a medical school exists, there should be good effects for the populations around the medical school. I see that as part of the social responsibility of medical schools. And it was really important to me, to AUC, to our leadership, that we were part of St. Martin's recovery. And we knew being able to come back would really help spark recovery, because it's a lot of people who come and eat at the restaurants and use the services and et cetera. So we continue to employ all of our employees there. That was a really, I think, important decision to make, and something we owed. We certainly owe to treat your colleagues well. So we kept them employed, and they worked hard at getting everything ready. And we brought our students back in January, and it was reasonably smooth. We under-anticipated how long it would take for everyone to get their internet established in their new places, because there were like 2 technicians working, and they just went one by one to 400 people so they got them done. So it took a little while to get everybody's internet back up and running. But other than that, we got people back into living quarters that we had inspected, that we had tested for mold, to ensure, as best we could, students' safety and well-being. And so the first class came back in January, and the day of the first class was this remarkable double rainbow that was positioned almost exactly over the school. It was the most amazing photo. I'll have to show you sometime. But a rainbow there, which always gives you a good feeling. So we came back in January. We let the students so we brought a couple of groups back from the UK. We left a couple of our semesters of students. We have 5 semesters in our medical science. So we left a couple of semesters of students there in the UK, and we ran a dual campus, one in St. Martin, one in the UK, for the January semester and for the May semester, which is the one that we're currently in right now, just to minimize the amount of movement of the students. It's not easy to go back and forth across the pond. So we moved people back once who would be there for another year, but everyone else we let stay across the pond in Preston. In September, when we start our September semester, we'll have all of our students again back in St. Martin, and we have had the island continues to recover. It's certainly a very different island than it was before Irma. You can still see destruction everywhere, but one of the most things that just really warms my heart is we have a number of community partners there in St. Martin. We promote service as a very important part of being a physician. And so we have community action days every semester. And since our return to St. Martin, even with lower numbers of students, we've had more participation in community action days than we ever have. And it is just amazing to see the future physicians out, hand in hand with the community, helping them on the things that are most important to them, particularly after Hurricane Irma.
Wonderful. So maybe to bring things to closure, could you offer your thoughts? Let's say you got a chance to speak to a room full of academic leaders, medical school deans, department chairs. What do you want to pass on to them that may help them should they experience some kind of major disaster?
Oh, I would love to have that opportunity. I think I learned an incredible amount. So let me start with this one. I have several, but I would say your ability to manage a crisis starts before the crisis, and it's not only in the plans for the crisis. We have since then, since Hurricane Irma, hired the Deloitte crisis management consulting group, who came in and helped us rewrite our hurricane plan. It is a much better playbook now to manage hurricanes in the future than before. So there's that piece. But and I think you picked up on the theme, kind of throughout this, that we had an incredible amount of help from a lot of people, from our UPlan partners, from the community members in St. Martin, even as well. And your ability, I feel strongly that part of your ability to be able to manage a crisis is to have been a good partner with the people that you work with. And I think sometimes, certainly a lot more in the past than recently, but in academia, we've stood apart from people sometimes instead of standing with and beside them. And boy, when you need them and when they need you in a crisis, it's much better if you've already developed those relationships. People knew our values, they knew what we stood for. We were able to find common ground very quickly, work through things. So I would say that being able to manage a crisis really happens, long before the crisis comes. The second piece I would say is just start. I think people, when they're in the middle of a crisis, where leaders stumble the most is in failing to act. And particularly, we sometimes want to try to think things through. Nothing wrong with thinking, but when you work in the incredible amount of ambiguity that exists in the onset of a crisis, you have to act. You have to start walking down a road, and you have to, because until you do, you can't see what all the things are that you need to solve, and you don't know what all the resources you're going to need. You don't know who all the people are going to need, but you just have to start. And I think that's just an incredibly critical thing. The last thing I would say, and we haven't really touched on this yet in this podcast, but about 6 days after the storm, when I was on a phone call with my board of trustees, one of them said, this is the time to pull out your strategic plan and see if you can advance any along your strategic plan. And, I wanted to ask him if he really understood what it was we were dealing with. But I'm glad I didn't, because he was absolutely right. And we did pull out our strategic plan, and we did find that it helped guide us even in crisis. And how many times are you asking for a crisis to make your point about moving or doing something differently? So by all means, when you have a crisis, use it to do the things differently that you've already planned for in your strategic plan. So that was probably the most fascinating thing that happened, was that not only were we able to continue class, to keep our students, to wrap the wellness around them, to have them do well, So we were able to move forward on our strategic plan, probably in ways that we would not have been able to without the crisis.
I think that's just brilliant advice. And while you would never seek or want or pray for a crisis, if it provides that breakthrough opportunity, best to seize the moment and to have the wisdom to act boldly.
Absolutely. I certainly, it was great advice I got, so I would want to pass it on. And I certainly, my first reaction to it was no, but I'm really glad that that they were able to convince me otherwise, because it was very effective.
So, Dr. Chumley, you have not really said anything about yourself, so I'm going to take this opportunity because I know you and I know Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor actually, many years ago, was one of our FMEC Emerging Leader Award winners, and she was picked because she had that leadership, that resilience, that vision. And I will just say this, it's been my experience knowing both of you that your skill set, your adaptive capacity, your resilience, and your determination to make sure that the people were taken care of in the fullest sense is at the core of what I'm hearing of how your organization responded to this crisis. So I'll just put that out there and say thank you for being who you are and the courage to respond to the situation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, there were certainly, besides myself and Julie, another very well-known person in family medicine, Dr. Mark Quirk, key part of our leadership team, actually on island during the crisis, as one of our leaders, really helping with communications and keeping some level of calmness. Didn't always stay calm, but some level of calmness. So I do very much believe that the discipline of family medicine has incredible has an incredible amount of leaders within it, but also probably a number of people in positions in family medicine that are kind of, without them knowing it, really honing their higher level leadership skills just by what they do really every day. And I think there is a lot of need in our world and in our profession, in academics, for leaders that have a lot of the skills that family medicine teaches you. Teaches you to quickly form rapport with just about any type of person, and to juggle competing demands, and to deal with wide ranges of emotions in very short periods of time, and just many other things that I think as you become a family doctor, you don't really realize how unique and special those characteristics are and how helpful they are in leadership.
Well, Dr. Chumley, thank you very much. I'm going to bring things to close here. Thank you for sharing this story, the Irma adventure.